Can everyone hear me? Okay. Great. My name is Eric Reardon. I am Congressman Quigley's District Director. I just want to thank you all for being here this evening. In addition to our panelists who will speak shortly, we also have here Commissioner Degnan from the Cook County Board, Senator Guzman from the State General Assembly, and then outside we also have staff from Representative Williams and Feigenholz's office who are here to help direct traffic and explain what their offices are doing in this tenuous time. I just also want to do a quick thank you to our staff. Everyone from our district office is here tonight or at other community meetings over on the north side. And our staff is currently working without pay because we believe in healthcare for other people. And so I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud each and every day to work with this team because they are dedicated to doing the right things for people. So I'm going to kick it over to my boss first for some opening remarks.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I want to thank you for being here. We scheduled this event last week, started putting it together, but something's happened since then right here at Lakeview High School in the community. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge something that happened just this last Saturday. We are joined by 16-year-old Lakeview High School student, Ophelia. Her father was taken from the Home Depot parking lot on Saturday morning. She is 16 years old and is fighting cancer right at this very moment, and now her father has been stolen from her. He was taken from his vehicle. Unfortunately, the family has limited information on his apprehension, but when they arrived to pick up his vehicle, they found dents in the window from the attack. They don't know where he is right now. His attorney, who's here tonight, does not know where he is right now. We don't know where he is right now. Senator Durbin, Senator Duckworth, and our office are trying to help the family, but the reality is this administration is purposely making it difficult to track and communicate with people who have been taken. So the father's attorney, Ophelia, her mother, they're with us. If you're okay, if you stand, if you can, please let us recognize the family. Thank you. The administration claims that they're arresting the worst of the worst, proving only that they are the worst of the worst. Can't imagine a justification for what's taking place here. This story is not the only one. In fact, it's the norm now. I've been told of autistic children being taken by ICE, parents detained in front of elementary schools, a well-known neighborhood vendor, the tamale lady, was picked up by ICE at a community flea market, was raided. This is not making us safer, it's just cruel. Stories like this are why we are all here tonight. I want to thank Alderman Bennett Lawson and Alderman Matt Martin for co-sponsoring this event with me. You will hear from both of them shortly. We also owe a huge thank you to Ed Yonka from ACLU and Tovia Siegel from the Resurrection Project for joining us tonight in the great work their organizations are doing. Tovia will be doing double duty as both a panelist and our trainer, so please give her some extra appreciation. And I do want to thank State Rep Ann Williams, State Senator Sarah Feigenholz, Cook County Commissioner Bridget Degnan for again supporting tonight's event. I also finally want to thank Central Romero, One Northside, who are also here tonight to help answer questions and, more importantly, give you tangible ways to support our communities in this moment. I'd also like to thank our host, Lakeview High School, and Principal P.J. Carafial. Now, I want to make something very clear. House rules say I'm not allowed to say that you should donate to any organization. So I am not saying that you should donate to these incredible organizations. But I will say that they all have tables here tonight. Look, it's a scary time. You ask for things that we can do. I'm going to talk about one other thing later, but we were down in Pilsen and Little Village at the businesses there. Some of them are down 20 to 50%. So if you want to have a late night dinner, come back later, have a nightcap, and help those businesses that are being ravaged right now, and you'd have excellent food. That would be a great idea. It is a scary time for people in Chicago, but the best way to fight fear is with knowledge and community. And that's what you're all doing today. The line I've used from my friend John Lewis is, we all came over here in different ships, but we're in the same boat now. So thanks again for being here. Oh. Our friend from the 44th Ward, the great Alderman Bennett Lawson.
Well, good evening. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Bennett Lawson. I have the honor of representing the 44th Ward, which is just west and south of where we are today. But almost all of my ward is in the Lakeview High School District, and all of it's in the 5th Congressional District. Mike Quigley is my constituent. And so thank you, Mike, and to your team for putting this together. For as much time as he may spend in DC, he spends a lot of time here. And he's there with our community, he's at community meetings and organizing events like this, and it shows. So thank you so much. The 44th Ward has always been a place of inclusion, whether that is racial or LGBT, people with disabilities. We welcome everyone, and that has not changed. A couple of years ago, when we were receiving new arrivals from Texas, our community showed up big. We had a mutual aid society, we had supplies, we had resources. We did everything we could to make sure that there were winter coats on kids who were sleeping outside. It's a tragedy that we had to roll with and meet in the moment, and we did. And I know the Lakeview community is feeling the same way right now. I was honored to be part of some actions over the weekend, 2 of them right here in Lakeview, where our community said no, that this is not acceptable. What's happening is not constitutional. We spent a lot of time on constitutional policing in this city. We've got a long way to go, but we know that agents that don't have badges, that aren't wearing uniforms, and are covering their faces, there's something that's being hidden, and that's not right. When people are being disappeared, right, that's not right. And so we know that our frustration, we have to turn into action on behalf of our neighbors, and to let our neighbors know that we stand with them, we'll stand together always, and have their backs. And so I'm really, really honored to be here with you tonight, to have our federal partners here. I will tell you to donate to anybody who is helping folks out. I don't think I have that restriction, because it makes a difference, and we're a community that has that ability. I know I was talking to some folks who are retired, who have the wonderful gift of time. And that's something that's really, really important right now too, as we keep an eye out for each other, especially around schools, parks, hospitals, all those places where you really should be taken care of. And Ophelia, know that your community stands with you through everything. And that's not going to change ever, no matter what that guy says. So thank you all for being here tonight. It's an honor to introduce my colleague and neighbor, Alderman Matt Martin.
Put this on.
Oh, this too? Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, they won't hear it on the stream.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Bennett. Big thank you to Congressman Quigley for putting this event together, and to your entire team. I think it really needs to be emphasized that we are not one-person offices, and a number of people in this audience are staff members in various offices who do critical work, who don't get thanked enough, and I do want to uplift that. I also want to again shout out Principal Carafiel for being a terrific leader, not just in Lakeview High School, but all across our Lakeview community. If we can acknowledge him just one more time. And then I just want to again welcome and say hello to the Torres Hidalgo family. It's so good to see both of you here. We obviously wish it was under different circumstances, but as Alderman Lawson mentioned, our community loves and supports you. We're here to do whatever we can, and we're just happy to be with you this evening. I want to emphasize a little bit more of this personal connection. Because in many parts of the 47th Ward, just a few Fridays ago, we saw ICE going all across our community, detaining people for absolutely no reason whatsoever, and really terrorizing and causing tremendous trauma all across the 47th Ward and beyond. My son goes to McPherson Elementary. It's just a few blocks north of here on Lawrence near Ravenswood. And he had to have a conversation just a few days before that Friday that I am so upset had to happen in his class, which is why people were wearing whistles, why the class was going to hear about ICE more often, and to have that age-appropriate but still impossibly challenging conversation about what ICE was doing across our community. And in talking with him that Friday, when there were ICE agents repeatedly circling his elementary school, and to ask him, how did you feel? He said, you know, Dad, I was scared, but then I saw neighbors standing on every single corner between where I get out of school, those school doors, and where our home is, and that made me feel better. And I want to underscore how he felt, because so many of you are coming here this evening to figure out how you can help other people across the 47th Ward, the 44th Ward, the 5th Congressional District, and all across the city feel better. So I want to thank you all, our offices, our resources. We are in constant communication. If there's any way in which you have questions about how to support, we will figure out how to plug you in. And it's just so important that all of you understand that you're leaders. You're coming together across our community to help keep us strong, help keep us safe. And I just want to say, both as an alderman and as a parent, how grateful I am that all of you are here this evening. Thank you.
You're good.
Who's next? Oh, you're just gonna-
So again, thank you all for being here. We did get some questions from folks who registered this evening. Unsurprisingly, they fell into just a couple of categories. So I am going to acknowledge some of the folks who wrote in these questions and then direct them to our panelists here. So we received several questions about how Rep. Quigley is fighting back. We got this from Evan in North Center, Scott from Park Ridge, Deepti from Norwood Park. So we're just going to use Evan's question, which is, what is Representative Quigley doing to use congressional oversight powers to obtain release names in DHS operations in Chicago? And how are you helping to fight against everything going on here in Congress, in the courts, and here on the ground?
Great. Thank you all for your questions. I think this one works.
Hello? Just get this. I'll figure it out.
This one works. Thank you. First, I have my voice and my vote, and I'm really glad we have extraordinary organizations like the ones that are here tonight that can bring lawsuits. Believe it or not, and we'll tell you, we can't sue unless we're in the majority. So we do amicus briefs and bring folks like Ed with you tonight to talk about what's happening in the courts, but we back them any way we can. I have my vote. Well, we have this shutdown going, and I voted against the funding bill, and I will until they restore Medicaid and the health tax credits, and vote against tax breaks for billionaires funded by cuts in your health care. Which brings us here. And you know what? If we're not doing anything in DC, it's great to be here. I've crisscrossed this city since this all started, and I learned a lot, and we have our voice to talk about. So just give you a sample beyond what you heard tonight. When I was at the domestic violence courthouse, we learned from advocates that women aren't getting orders of protection because of ICE going to that court, right? So so much for keeping people safe, right? The women are afraid. 90% of the people there are women and children because of ICE going to that courthouse. I've been to food pantries where the lines are shorter because people are afraid of getting food for their kids. They're now delivering, they're now doing drive-thrus. I've been to shelters that have been raided and heard firsthand from the people who were affected and by the terrified staff affected. For people who would rather have no choice but to be homeless rather than be in risk of being scooped. So we've asked for an Inspector General of Homeland Security investigation into what ICE has done, their treatment, particularly treatment of children, the South Shore raid that you heard about, and many others. We will be in the majority again, and we need to document as much of what is taking place right now because there will be accountability. So we'll be part of that as well. And sharing those stories is particularly important. I also mentioned what was going on in Pilsen and what was going on in Little Village, and the fact that it wasn't just restaurants. I want you to know this. The event planners, people who who make dresses, florists, and so forth. These are all second and third generation family-owned businesses that are now being devastated. Little Village is the second highest grossing business strip in the entire city, second only to the Mag Mile, and we were there with them last week. So look, there's a lot more we are going to do and that I'll do. I'm being trained as a rapid responder, going to work with them. Little could I ever imagine that a president of the United States would say that our cities are a perfect training ground for the military to be used against the enemy from within. So we'll be there helping with whistle kits. We'll be helping this week in being part of the walking school bus. And I only encourage you to add your voice and your feet to do much of the same. Thank you.
Okay, I think we got this one to work. So I'm going to pass this over to Ed and Tovia. We had questions about what strategies work best against this administration and what can I do to fight back?
Thank you. First of all, it's great to be here, Congressman, and all of you. To this family, what you could say on behalf of Chicago, how sorry I am to hear your story, and I hope that you're reunited soon. I think when you think about this administration, the sort of compelling or overriding desire on their part is to be cruel, is to engage in practices that are, so outrageous that you end up discussing some part of what they're doing rather than the philosophy and the theory that guides all of it. So I think a part, one of the strategies that we're finding, at least in the short term, that works best is to actually get them in court. justify their actions and to justify what it is that they're doing in our name with our tax dollars in the way that they engage in these activities on our streets. So, you know, I think many of you have probably heard, and the ACLU is part of the legal team that brought a case against ICE and DHS for their use of excessive force and violent tactics aimed mainly at protesters and journalists. Well, when those officials today are under question by a district court judge about why they're engaged in these activities, they talk about the physical safety of, you know, the officers. And they talk, for example, about the Southeast Side activity last week that many of us saw. And they mention the fact that, you know, they have to be safe and secure in this situation. And when the question comes up about why they ran a car or who decides to, you know, use tear gas, there are no answers to these questions. There's no evidence as to why it is. And so, you know, I think one of the things that we thought of as a beginning point is to repeatedly get them into court where they have to explain under oath what is actually guiding a lot of this activity that we're seeing, and then look at that as a way to again expose the vacuousness of much of what it is we're seeing, even while, you know, we know that there's still harm being done to people on the ground.
Hi, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, my name is Toby Siegel. I work at an organization called the Resurrection Project. We're based in Pilsen, and we're primarily in Pilsen and Dacoby Yards on the southwest side of Chicago. We're an immigrant rights organization. We have attorneys who represent people in their immigration cases, defend against deportation, and we also organize. That means we work with immigrants, mostly immigrant moms on the southwest side of Chicago, who volunteer in their children's elementary schools, who volunteer to be community educators and share know your rights information and connect people to resources. And I've worked in immigrant justice for the last 10 years or so. The last 3 weeks have been the hardest in the 10 years I've worked in this. The folks on my team haven't left their homes in 3 weeks because they're terrified they're not going to come back if they do. It's a level of fear that it's pretty hard for me to even understand in my body what it would mean to not be able to leave my own home. Even just hearing it from my team at work is horrifying. And so it's hard to answer what works because I think if we knew exactly what worked, we'd be doing it. But there are some things that have become really clear. The first is that at risk of sounding trite, caring for one another, knowing our neighbors, participating in the rapid response networks that are now incredibly functional and built up and citywide to alert people of ICE activity, walking folks to school, children to school, at least in the neighborhoods where we work, attendance is way down at schools because parents are fearful of bringing their children to school. We had a parent in one of the schools we run a program in who was detained dropping their child off last week. And so those things really matter. Getting trained in rapid response is the conversation of ideas so we can tell people ICE is right here, don't come here, we can document and we'll talk in the training later more concretely about how to do that. That's all essential. And I know that because my team at work is telling me, as isolated and terrified as they feel, it means people who love them, who support them, right, and who want to make sure that they can live freely and thrive in the city. So one thing we can do is these really immediate ways of taking care of each other. The other thing I think we need to do is, and this is maybe even more pertinent to the folks in this room, I think we have to shift public opinion. Immigrants have been organizing for decades, right, and preparing for this moment. It's more horrific, I think, than anyone could have imagined, and it's an extension of what's been happening for a long time. The Department of Homeland Security has been funded at higher levels and built up, and this didn't happen overnight. And in part, it's because immigration has not been an issue that people vote on, or at least that Democrats vote on, right? Republicans certainly do, but it's, we've allowed it to get there. We need to be outraged at a level that shifts the public opinion enough to stop this from continuing. So that means even if you have a member of Congress and senators in Congress and in the Senate who support immigrants, they need to hear over and over and over from us that this is unacceptable. It cannot continue. Call your friends, especially those in Republican districts, if it gets to the point where this is politically untenable for elected officials. That starts to shift things, and we have, it's not there because it's still continuing, right? So it has to get there. This has to be the thing that we vote on. So I think, there's actions we can take right now in our neighborhoods, and then there's something way bigger that has to happen on a national level, and we have to be a part of that so that this ends. Thank you.
No, certainly. Thank you. And just to that point, we were in Backyards last week, and during the course of our meeting that went on for about 45 minutes, the rapid response team had to leave us twice to go deal with ICE raids in the neighborhood. So as part of our commitment to them was to inspire our constituents to help carry that water that Tovia and her colleagues are taking on in other neighborhoods throughout the city. So we are very pleased to see our constituents stepping up in that effort. So moving on, these questions are probably best answered by Ed, but we have a lot of questions about the state and local response in the courts. So we had one from Linda and Barbara from Wrigleyville who asked, and excuse my language, I'm just going to quote, why are ICE thugs allowed to break laws without repercussions, pointing weapons at bystanders, not asking people for identification, physically assaulting people, kidnapping people without giving a reason, using tear gas illegally? We also got a question from Linda in Lincoln Park. What can CPD do to protect people when ICE is trying to force us out of our cars and buildings? So on those light notes, Ed, do you have a response?
Let me start. Thank you. So let me begin by saying that we and the state of Illinois and other legal groups are already fighting back against some of these excesses. As I mentioned, there is a lawsuit with a temporary restraining order now in place that says that ICE and CPB and any other federal officer cannot use projectiles or chemical weapons or the chemical agents on protesters or on people who are simply engaged in First Amendment activity, protesting the activities of ICE anywhere in the Northern District of Illinois. Now, we also know that since that order was issued, there have been instances where we've seen that it's already been violated. The judge called in a regional ICE director today, as well as a regional director of CPB, although Customs and Border Patrol, although it was interesting that the ICE director she originally called in actually got called back to Washington just before he would have had to testify today. So, you know, those activities are already going on. We're looking for other ways to enforce it. We're looking other ways to do that. Secondly, in terms of some of the activities of ICE themselves directed towards the people that they are targeting, you know, about 2 weeks ago, a different federal judge extended a consent decree that the National Immigrant Justice Center and the ACLU had won on behalf of the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights and Organized Communities Against Deportation, or OCAD, called the Costin and Nava settlement. That settlement puts limits on what ICE can do in terms of warrantless arrests, in terms of traffic stops, and in terms of collateral arrests. That is, when they arrest someone when they've gone to target someone else. Given the fact that that consent decree is now back in place and is being extended for several months, and that ICE now has to share with us the information that they are getting, information about everyone they've arrested without a warrant in the Chicago area for the last several months. Those people should now be eligible for release, and so we'll be working through the court system as quickly as we can to do, you know, to make those changes and to do that. The final part of the question, you know, I think that one of the things that we know is that it is very unlikely that local law enforcement is going to interfere or interdict when federal law enforcement agencies are engaged in activities in the area and they say that they're enforcing federal law. That is generally the way that works, that they step aside and don't interfere or don't get involved in those situations. But I think, you know, to the point that Congressman Quigley made in his opening remarks, one of the things that we need to be doing is to capture as much information about these activities so that people are held accountable ultimately for the way in which these actions have taken place on our streets. One of the things I was struck by today sitting in court and listening to these two officials testify was that they could not even say if anyone in the Chicago area has been disciplined for the use of excessive force. And we have all seen the videos of people being thrown to the ground, people being hit with projectiles, the indiscriminate use of tear gas, literally an officer pointing a gun out the window at someone, you know, in suburban Chicagoland over the weekend when they were simply protesting what the officers were doing. Threats against people for recording the activities of these officers, which, by the way, is protected by the First Amendment. And so, therefore, you know, I think the fact that they are not even interested in, that they can't see any of these as violations where someone should get reported or someone should get disciplined is a testament to the fact that accountability is not likely to come from this administration. And we're going to have to fight and continue to work to ensure that it does come, because this is not the kind of thing that we can let happen on our streets and then have no one be accountable for it.
Our next question is for Representative Quigley. Mike and Rose want to both know what the Democratic Party is doing in this moment.
Thank you. First, I want to point out that This is the agents of chaos theory, is that they're hoping we chase our own tails and we only focus on one thing at a time. Well, as you know, there's 20 or 30 things happening at one time, and we have to be on it. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can and do more than address just this one issue, as absolutely critical as it is. When you think about everything that's going on right now, the trend toward authoritarianism, toward tyranny, that's not just manifested here, right? It's the weaponization of the FCC, weaponization of the Justice Department. We can't let those things pass. We have to do all the things we're talking about tonight on all those other issues as well. There is a member, a soon-to-be member of Congress waiting to get sworn in as soon as we go back into session, right? And when she is sworn in, she's going to be the deciding person on a discharge petition to release the Epstein files, right? So there's a lot more to do. And when you think about all the dozens of other issues that are taking place, in addition to the funding issues for healthcare and the like, here's an issue you probably haven't heard about for a long time. And it's probably the thing that our grandchildren will be most angry about, and that's climate change. So we're going to stay on that. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight, and our thoughts and prayers are with you. In the meantime, Trump's tariffs are going to be ravaging through our economy, affecting small businesses here in Chicago. We have to help them. RFK Jr. is making our healthcare system way, way worse. And this president is banning our allies abroad. So there's just a lot more to do. I love being here with you. We've got to get back to D.C. and make these fights. When you think it doesn't work, just remember, they're still doing the Medicaid cuts, but they put them off because of all the pressure they were getting. They didn't want to have that happen before the midterm. It shows the No Kings March and others, those things actually have an impact. So I encourage you to stay involved, stay engaged, get really good at the things that help change majorities in the House, and stay in touch with us. It's absolutely right. We want to hear from you, right? And I want to commend my staff. They are really getting super, super busy, and it's a lot tougher now because there's not a lot of people they can call to help you. So I want to thank them for what they do and for what all the staff does for our own state reps, state senators, county commissioners, members of the MWRD, clearly the House and Senate staff are just extraordinary. There's a field hearing this Friday, too, with Representative Jayapal to talk about all these things right here in D.C., a congressional hearing. So, look, there's a lot more we can do and we will do, and recognizing these issues. But we're going to use the leverage of our votes and our voice as much as we can. We will get through this together.
So on that note, I'm going to turn you over to the very capable hands of Tovia to train you and scoot Representative Quigley off to the next community meeting to do this all over again. But we thank you guys for being here, and please see our staffs outside if you have any questions.
Let the training begin.
actually may come down here because it's a pretty small group. So. Okay, great. So we're gonna go through what's a typical Know Your Rights training. Before I go through this, I want to caveat that what the constitutional rights that everyone has in this country, regardless of your immigration status, what they are on paper, and how they're employed by federal agents or completely ignored by federal agents, right, is really, really different. The reason that we still think it's essential for everybody to know what their rights are and be able to exercise them is because, one, like Ed spoke to, there are ways that we can bring cases, legal cases, when rights are violated and actually get people out of detention and avoid deportations and things like that. And because we need to continue to assert that this is how things should be, right? And document all of the violations so that we can keep working towards making this reality, right? And making this the world that we live in, not just the world as it should be. It's also a pretty small group tonight, so feel free to ask questions, ask for clarification. I came down here so I can be a little closer and hear you and see you. The idea is for this to be useful. So we're gonna talk about understanding what your constitutional rights are. These are true for everybody who is in the United States, regardless of immigration status. How you can act safely and confidently and be as prepared as possible if you encounter immigration enforcement. And lastly, to think about how we can support each other. So high level, there are lots of different kinds of law enforcement. There's federal law enforcement, including ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is under the Department of Homeland Security. Traditionally, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, was the main federal agency carrying out immigration enforcement. That has changed. Now, most federal law enforcement agencies have been designated as agencies that can carry out immigration enforcement. So we see the Drug Enforcement Agency, we see the FBI, we see all kinds of other federal agencies now here in Chicago doing immigration enforcement along with ICE. And then there are also state and local law enforcement agencies. There's the Illinois State Police and the Cook County Sheriff and the Chicago Police Department. Under Illinois state law, called the Trust Act, those agencies cannot collaborate with federal agencies to carry out civil immigration enforcement. If they do, that's illegal, that's a violation of state law. It's also a violation for CPD of city policy. And we need to document that because there can be legal consequences. So I don't know how easy it is to see this, but we're trying to let people know visually what the difference is between a Chicago police officer and a federal agent. Actually, it's not that hard to tell right now because most of the federal agents that we have been seeing in the city right now are masked. They're in vests, sometimes like military, uniforms. And Chicago police, on the other hand, typically, there are some plainclothes police officers. Typically, though, they're in the light blue shirt and a uniform that pretty clearly indicates Chicago police. They also should have badge numbers and names visible, as well as Chicago police insignia. So it's not always clear, but it's typically pretty clear what agency an agent is with. Okay, this is the most important slide. So if you remember one thing from this presentation, it is this. What are your rights? This is true for anybody. It does not matter your immigration status. Number one, you have the right to remain silent. To exercise this, you can say, I wish to remain silent. When we do this presentation to folks who don't speak English, we practice saying that in English, I wish to remain silent. Number two, you have the right not to permit entry to private property. That includes your home or your car without a valid warrant. We'll look at what a valid warrant looks like, but it needs to be signed by a judge. It needs to indicate who the warrant is for what time and place it is for. And if an official does not have that warrant, you can refuse entry. You can refuse entry to your home, to your car, to a search. You have the right not to sign anything. We're seeing that people who are detained by federal agents right now are being pressured to sign their own deportation orders. What happens very, very frequently is people get detained, and they actually might have a case to fight. If we can get them access to an attorney, we're working hard to get every single person who contacts us in touch with free legal immigration legal services. But what we're hearing is that people are being pressured. Sign here, this will all go faster, you'll get out, you won't have to sit in prison, right, in jail, and people are signing their own deportation orders. So it's extremely important for people to know that you have the right not to sign something, in particular if you don't understand it or don't agree with it. You have the right to speak to and be represented by an attorney. Critically, in immigration proceedings, you are not provided an attorney like you are in criminal proceedings where you get a public defender. In immigration court, despite the fact that you are going up against a prosecutor employed by the federal government and you may be facing lifelong separation from your family, you do not get an immigration attorney. You have to provide your own attorney. We see children going up and representing themselves in immigration court because they're not provided an attorney. And you have the right to request a local telephone call. So it's really important. We encourage people to memorize phone numbers because your personal belongings will typically be taken. You won't have access to the contacts in your cell phone, right? So memorize a phone number so that you can make the call. Okay, so those are 5 basic rights that are true regardless of immigration status. And we need to repeat this over and over and over and make sure everybody knows so we can document when they're being violated. Right. Yeah?
Question, I don't know if you know the answer, but like the man, the young woman that was here, her father, did they have a warrant to take him out of the car?
I don't know, but I will say in general, the vast, vast, vast majority of arrests that have happened in the last month or so have been without a warrant. And Ed from the ACLU mentioned earlier that there's this settlement in the Chicagoland area, a legal settlement that says that federal agents cannot make warrantless arrests. And if they do, which they are brazenly, I mean, literally like 95% of arrests are without a warrant, the vast, vast, vast majority. There is legal recourse to be able to get those people out of detention and released because the arrest was not legal in the first place. So no, I mean, to your question, legally, federal agents cannot make warrantless arrests. Actually, the vast majority of the arrests have been without a warrant. Yeah. Okay, so this is probably really hard to see. I can barely see it, so I imagine people sitting further back can't, but I can describe it. This is an example of a warrant that is not valid. It's called an administrative warrant. It's something that often officers present. Basically, it is not valid because it does not have the signature of a judge. It's not a judicial warrant. In order for a warrant to be valid, it needs to have the signature of a judge, and it needs to designate exactly for whom the warrant is, for what time, what place. So we tell people, in the extremely unlikely event agents actually come up to the door of your home with a valid judicial warrant, it is still only valid for the person who is named on the warrant. You should not open the door, right? Demand to see the warrant, and in the event that they have it, the person named on the warrant could choose to step out of the house and close the door behind them. The warrant would no longer be valid for anyone else. The relevant thing about warrants is that federal agents, it's extremely rare that they actually have a warrant. And if they don't, we need to know that, we need to document that so we can try to get people released from detention. We can share these slides after so you can see this, and we have it all over our website, which I'll share as well. But this is a valid warrant, essentially because it has the signature of a judge and names specifically for whom it is and where. Okay, so we're gonna go through a few different scenarios at home, in the workplace, in your car, the places that we're seeing people get detained, and what happens in each of those scenarios. And then we're also gonna talk about what you can do if you witness ICE activity. So at home, like I mentioned, you are not required to open the door without a valid judicial warrant. If officers approach a home, the people inside should not open the door. They should ask to see a warrant, in the window or under the door. Once you open the door, you are giving legal right for the officers to enter. So do not open the door, demand to see a warrant. If they do force their way in, which is likely, don't resist, but record, right? Document everything that's happening. Yes? Yeah, that's a good question. So it needs, for a warrant to be valid, it needs to say, like, if it's an apartment building with multiple units, it needs to name the unit number in order for it to be valid. It needs to specify exactly where. If they break the door down, which they are doing, they're smashing car windows, they're breaking doors down. We only say don't resist. Look, it's up to an individual how they respond. People should just know if they try to resist, they may add charges, they may make it more difficult in court. We may have an easier time getting someone released from detention if they haven't resisted, basically. That's a good question. The question is, yeah, thank you for the reminder to repeat. The question is, can you call the Chicago police if federal agents are doing something illegal? Like breaking down doors? Not really. The Chicago police are really not gonna do anything that would, could possibly be construed as being involved with immigration enforcement. So on the plus side, they're not aiding immigration enforcement. They also are not going to do anything to intervene. So they're not gonna do anything. Once they know it's immigration, actually, they're probably not gonna show up. Yeah.
But if they don't have any warrant, and they just try to break in or do illegal things, so why can CPT not interfere? That I don't understand. I mean, if the Illinois state has no value against a federal?
So the question is, why can't Chicago Police Department intervene if the federal authorities are doing something illegal? So first of all, I'm not an attorney. I'm a community organizer. But essentially they don't have jurisdiction to control what federal authorities are doing. So it also seems absurd to me that there is very little that local police can do, but for the most part, they do not have the legal authority to intervene with the actions of federal agents.
It's like third world.
It's horrific, yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's, I think it's really hard for all of us to see institutions that we may trust or think could protect us unable to. I agree. Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back to what Ed said about the current lawsuit, that if somebody is detained, how soon do you get informed of that person's detained?
I can speak to that because our organization, so the question is, if somebody's detained, how soon do we find out, especially if it's a warrantless arrest, and we may be able to help get them out of detention. So the organization I work for, the Resurrection Project, has an online form for when people are detained, their loved ones can fill it out so we can connect them to an attorney. And we work with a consortium of quite a few legal services organizations across the state to provide representation. So collectively, we see most of the people who are detained by ICE. The question is how quickly. Basically, it's as quickly as a family member contacts us, or an organization, or if the individual contacts us from detention, which also happens frequently. So it can happen pretty immediately after an arrest. They're supposed to, they have not yet. They are supposed to provide a list of all the people who they have arrested. In the last few weeks, they have not. I'm going to move us along through the presentation, but please continue asking questions. So we talked about at home, don't open the door, right? At work, your rights are similar, except that it's the employer's property. So the employer can decide who comes in. So as an employer could say that ICE cannot enter private areas at the workplace. So our recommendation is that all workplaces have a designated private area, like an employees only area, or some kind of, if it's a public workplace, like a grocery store or something like that they have a private area. If it's a private workplace, not the kind of workplace where anyone can walk in, that it's clearly marked that this is a private workplace. The door is locked at our offices. We keep the door locked. We don't open it for anybody. Unless somebody steps outside to see who they are, for the safety of the folks we work with, and so your rights are similar at work in that that agents cannot enter without a warrant unless the employer or the manager lets them in, which unfortunately we've seen recently. But even if that is the case and ICE comes to our workplace, your right to remain silent, to not sign anything, to speak with a lawyer, all of those remain the same. Questions about workplaces? In public places, ICE does not need a warrant. This is what we're seeing most frequently right now. We're seeing people picked up at bus stops. When I say picked up, I mean kidnapped, right? Abducted from the street vendors, people in parking lots. ICE does not need a warrant to be in these places, and they're racially profiling and detaining people in public. This is the majority of detentions we're seeing right now. If ICE stops you on the street, you should not tell them anything about who you are, your country of origin. The first thing you should say is, am I free to go? If the answer is no, remain silent. And it's actually really important for those of us who are US citizens to do this too. Because as soon as I say, I'm a US citizen, let me go, right? What does that do for the person standing next to me who can't say that? So we all need to do the same thing. If approached by any kind of law enforcement, say, am I free to go? If the answer is no, say I'm exercising my right to remain silent and do so. And we recommend that people don't carry false documents or documents that indicate their country of origin, like a foreign driver's license, things like this. That is indication to federal agents that allows them to infer immigration status. The other thing that we're seeing frequently right now is traffic stops. So people being pulled over in their cars. If ICE stops you while driving, they can ask for a driver's license and registration and proof of insurance. That's true of anyone who's driving needs to have those things, right? But you should show them that and nothing else, right? No documents that indicate country of origin or immigration status. You don't need to open the window unless ICE has a valid judicial warrant. So same thing as a home, you can keep the window closed and ask for a warrant and refuse a search. We are seeing agents escalate situations of traffic stops often. We're seeing them breaking car windows, things like that. Document all of that to try to fight it in court. If possible, I see a question in the back. Yeah, we've been seeing, so the question is, can ICE stop and detain minors? We've seen them doing it. Typically, we've seen minors released relatively quickly from ICE detention, but they are absolutely detaining minors. The other horrific thing we're seeing is that when there are families in a car, we've seen ICE detain parents and leave children in the car. So it's horrible either way, but we are seeing them detain minors. Yes?
Just since we were talking about identification, I know Illinois is like a stop and ID state, technically. So if ICE stops you like on the street just for reporting, is it still a requirement to show them your driver's license? Is that the law?
If you're not driving, like if
you're just happen to be around?
No. So the question is, let's say ICE just stops you on the street. Do you need to show ID? No. You should exercise your right to remain silent. You should first ask, am I free to go? And second, exercise your right to remain silent. And we're going to talk about filming encounters as well. That's your legal right to do in the state of Illinois, and we encourage people to do it safely. This is hard to talk about because we talk about how to try not to escalate an encounter. The people being detained are almost never the ones escalating an encounter. It's the federal agents. We talk about this to try to keep people as safe as possible. That is our goal. And just give folks information about what might make ICE agents escalate an encounter. Things like running, yelling, fighting back are just things that may escalate an encounter. Right? It's up to an individual how they respond, but they should know what the potential consequences are, right? Instead, we tell people to practice trying to remain as calm as possible. Think about the way that we train people is, if you have an encounter with ICE agents, think about being there for an hour and how to stay quiet and calm for an hour. It's incredibly difficult, right? But that's a mental sort of exercise and tool that may be helpful. Yeah. So the question is, if people witness ICE agents and decide to link arms, what might happen or what might the consequences be. ICE agents are saying that almost anything could be interfering with, they say that it's interfering with enforcement. So something like linking arms and stopping ICE agents from getting to the place they're trying to go or the person they're trying to go to, the agents are probably going to say that that's interfering with arrest or obstructing arrest. So those are the potential consequences that people should know if they choose to do that. People can make their own decision about whether to do that. Yeah. It really depends. A lot of those cases haven't even gone through the court system yet of recent arrests. Sometimes they're dismissed. It depends on the facts of the case. That's the kind of thing that, this is a general know your rights training. There are also much more in-depth ICE watch trainings and rapid response trainings, and I'm happy to connect folks with the organizations that do that. They can better answer those questions about like the nitty-gritty of in a situation with ICE, what's most likely to happen. So that's a good point. So if you're the question was, if you're pulled over in a car, do passengers need to show identification? So no. So under Illinois law, if the police pull you over, only the driver needs to show proof that they can legally drive with a driver's license and valid insurance and car registration. Other people in the car do not need to show identification and should not. Okay, so what happens, that's all trying to prevent someone from being detained by ICE. What happens if they are detained by ICE? They should only provide their name and date of birth. The reason for this is so lawyers and family members can locate them, right? Without that information, we won't know where they are. Ask to talk to an attorney, don't sign anything, and ask to see a judge. If you know of someone who is detained by ICE, yes. So it says memorize your 9-digit A number. An A number is an identification number that anybody in immigration custody receives, or anybody who's applied for any kind of immigration benefit before. That's also used to, oops, oh no. What have I done? Okay, that's also used to locate people. Yeah. Okay, if somebody you know is detained by ICE, there is a website, locator.ice.gov, to look them up, look up where they're detained. It is extremely unreliable right now. It used to be pretty reliable. Now people are being disappeared. We're not finding them for days or weeks at a time. Sometimes a consulate can help locate someone. So if they're a Mexican national, contacting the Mexican consulate, they sometimes have more access than we do. You should activate an emergency family plan. Hopefully this is something that people have already made. We're working hard to have everybody who's vulnerable come up with an emergency family plan of who would take care of their children, what will happen with their assets. That would be the time to activate that, right? And this is a presentation we give to people often who are vulnerable at risk of detention. And so we also talk about putting aside some money if possible for things like attorney fees or bond. There are currently no immigration detention centers in Illinois. This is a good thing. This is something activists fought for a long time, to shut down immigration detention in Illinois. The flip side of that is people are sent much further away. So most people are being detained all over the country, even when they're initially detained in Illinois. Yeah, great question. So the question is, what about Broadview, right? We've all seen in the news in Broadview, a suburb right nearby. Technically, that's a processing center, and so people are not supposed to be held there more than, I believe it's 72 hours. It's not set up as a detention center. The conditions are deplorable, and there are lawsuits by the ACLU and other organizations to try to limit the time that people can be held there, because we're seeing people held much longer than 72 hours, but the federal government says it's a processing center where people are just passed through before they're sent to longer-term detention centers. So if you know someone who is detained by ICE, at our website, trpimmigrantjustice.org, like I mentioned, there's a form to fill out where we'll get someone in touch with an attorney. Another really important resource is the ICER Family Support Hotline. This is the phone number to call. If you see ICE activity or suspect ICE activity, this activates the rapid response networks that are all over the city. So I recommend you save it in your phone and you have it handy. So you're not like Googling this phone number, right, if something happens. It's right here, 855-435-7693. I'll give folks, I see folks taking pictures or writing it down. I'll give folks a minute. This is the phone number. If you see or suspect ICE activity or anything suspicious, to call to activate those rapid response networks. Yeah.
The fact that there's no facility here in Illinois, does that make it harder to get people back home?
The question is, does the fact that there are no detention facilities in Illinois make it harder to, I think, to access people who are detained, right? I think it's a double-edged sword, honestly. We want fewer detention facilities. That's a good thing. And what's happening is that people are being sent to Louisiana or Kentucky or Texas, and that does make it more difficult for attorneys to access them. The goal is not to have detention anywhere. Right now, detention is further away, and it makes it harder for families and attorneys to access people. Yeah, I see a question in the back. I think the question, if I heard it correctly, is are we seeing US citizens or people with lawful immigration status detained? Yes. We are seeing it happen frequently. Usually we're able to get those people out of detention relatively quickly, but we need to continue to document it because it's happening rampantly. Okay. So we talked about rights with federal immigration agents. I also want to talk about rights with local police. They're very similar, except that you have some more rights with local police than with federal agents. So the key differences are that local police, so that's Chicago Police, Illinois State Police, Cook County Sheriffs, any suburban police department cannot ask about your immigration status or ask any question that might lead to, like, where are you from or how long have you lived here, things like that. And they cannot detain you to pass you over to ICE under state law. So those are rights that we have in the state of Illinois with local police. Some cities, including Chicago, have sanctuary laws that even expand on those. That, to your question earlier, ICE can still operate pretty freely in those places. It only means that local police can't cooperate. Your rights, though, with local police are the same in that if you are in an interaction with them, you can ask, am I free to go? If the answer is yes, you should go, leave. If the answer is no, remain silent. And the same phone number that we shared earlier is also a place where you can report violations of the Trust Act. If you see local police cooperating with federal agents for civil immigration enforcement in any way, that's illegal, we should report it. The same phone number is a place where our partner organizations are collecting and litigating those cases. So we had some questions about filming law enforcement and interacting with law enforcement. It is legal to film law enforcement. It is your right to be able to film law enforcement as long as you're not interfering with what they're doing. So you should film law enforcement so that we can document if they are violating laws and rights. If they, you should stay an arm's length away. That's our sort of rule of thumb for saying I can't be interfering if I'm more than an arm's length away. If they ask you to back up or say that you're interfering, you can back up and narrate in the filming, I am backing away, I am not interfering, it is my right to film. That helps if there ever is a legal case in the future to demonstrate that you're not interfering. We also recommend that people, if you're witnessing somebody being detained, you ask, is there someone I can call? Do you have a phone number of someone I can call so we can call a family member and tell them what happened, but we're not revealing the identity of the person being detained. These are some suggestions of things you can say if law enforcement accuses you of interfering, right? I'm just making sure no one's rights are being violated. I'm watching from a reasonable distance. I'm a safe distance away. You're violating my rights, right? I'm stepping back. I'm exercising my rights to record. Any questions about this? I know there were some previously, so I want to make sure this answers. Yeah. So we don't recommend asking their name because then we're telling them to remain silent with law enforcement, right? And once you're asking their name, they're telling the law enforcement their name as well. So instead we say, is there a phone number you want us to call? Is there someone you want us to contact? And families very often don't know their loved one has been detained. We find cars abandoned on the street all the time and have to look in them to try to figure out who might have been detained, right? And who we can contact. And so it's trying to get in touch with a family member who then can give us information and we can try to provide an attorney, et cetera. Yeah.
How do you feel about people like yelling at ICE agents and antagonizing them? Do you feel that's a safe tactic to try to?
Yeah, so the question is, how I feel or thoughts around people antagonizing, yelling at ICE agents. I think it's up to the person, anyone, how they want to respond if they're seeing something violent and horrible happening. Some things to keep in mind is that doing that may put the person being detained in more danger if the ICE agents get more violent. It may put the person yelling at legal risk of interfering or obstructing, and being accused of that. So those are things people should keep in mind. Something that can be really effective is just yelling that ICE is present so that other people around know. We're seeing that over and over and it's working to say like, ICE is here, ICE is here. You see people carrying whistles. That's something we encourage, right, to alert that ICE is there. That might be an alternative rather than like antagonizing the ICE officer and potentially endangering the person being detained, actually just to alert everyone else in the area that ICE is there. Once someone is detained, it's pretty difficult in that moment to stop it, right? But we can try to keep other people safe. So some key resources, I already touched on these, but There's actually another website I didn't mention, IllinoisImmigrationInfo.org. We work with the city and the state and a lot of nonprofits to keep that updated. We update it every week with know your rights information, updates on policy, things like that. So that can be a helpful resource. IllinoisImmigrationInfo.org. And the phone number I mentioned before, the ICER, which is another organization we work closely with, their hotline. If you're witnessing ICE activity or suspect ICE activity, if you see a car that you think might belong to ICE and you want rapid responders to go look at it, you can call that number. We have small, like business card size cards that we can get for you. We have yard signs, we have flyers. If you go to our website, and I can make sure folks have this, and it's sent out after to people who registered for the event. We're in Pilsen. You can come pick up as much material as you want to distribute in neighborhoods around the city, and we encourage you to do so. These are examples of flyers that tell you what to do if you're witnessing ICE activity, if someone's been detained, if someone has a court date, things like that. These are the kinds of resources we want distributed as widely as possible. And lastly, I'll just mention before we take additional questions, there's unfortunately a huge amount of fraud happening right now with immigration, people who hold themselves out to be immigration attorneys, which is doubly horrible that there's people taking advantage of folks who are already in extremely vulnerable situations, but just if you're helping people access legal services, to make sure it's from a trusted provider, a trusted organization. We're seeing huge amounts of fraud of people saying that they're attorneys, that they can help you fix your situation, get you out of detention, things like that, and they're just taking people's money and putting them often at more risk. Okay, so I will end there and take other questions from the audience, but I'll also stick around if people have questions that they don't want to, say out loud. I will be here. Thank you. Please take action, right? We all have something we can do. And my call to you, my ask to you is that you do something else that you're not already doing after tonight, and then get somebody else to do that too. Thanks. Okay, I'm gonna try to go across the room so I don't miss anyone.
Not a question.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this good work.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, over here. People are being detained. So the question was basically what counts as probable cause to detain someone. People are being detained without any probable cause. People are being detained because they're just being profiled. So people are being snatched off the street and detained. Legally, what they need and what could be helpful in as they go before a judge and fight their case is different. It depends on the case, and so I don't want to give any specific advice for your friend, but it sounds like they already have an attorney. Is that correct? Okay, so that's honestly the best thing is for them to have an attorney. People are 10 times more likely not to get deported when they have an attorney, so we're doing everything we can to get people representation. That's not sexy, but it's crucial, right, to have legal representation, so we're working hard to do that. And yeah, so it depends on the case, but if they already have an attorney, that's the best thing that they can do.
My second question is, she was held in Broadview for over 72 hours. Is that grounds for?
That may be, so the question is if someone's held in Broadview, the processing center, for over 72 hours, that may be grounds for a case, and there are organizations, I believe the ACLU and National Immigrant Justice Center are litigating that right now, so you should reach out to them to see if they could be a class member in those cases or if the person would qualify. Mm-hmm. Other questions? Yes. Yeah, the question is about rapid response training. So the organizations that are leading rapid response trainings around the city are called the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, or ICIRR, ICIRR, and Organized Communities Against Deportation. So to get plugged into the rapid response work, those are your go-to spots, and I'm happy to write those down for folks and show you how to get connected. When you get connected to a rapid response network, they do a really good job. We work very closely with these organizations of making sure people are trained before they're doing rapid response. So that training involves learning how to identify ICE, document, how to try to keep people as safe as possible in those situations, how to alert people, some of the things we talked about, but much more in depth. And then once you've gone through those trainings, you're connected to a local neighborhood network. Typically, people do it in their own neighborhood where they live or work so that they can get as quickly as possible to reports. But if you wanted to volunteer with another neighborhood and commit to being present in that neighborhood at the times you sign up for, that's also an option. And so we have Signal chats, an encrypted app to communicate. And when somebody calls into that hotline that I mentioned and says there's ICE activity happening here, or we hear reports from a neighbor, or get that information from social media, any way we get it, then people are deployed and typically are getting there in within a few minutes, because we're all organized within neighborhoods to go first verify. We also get a lot of false reports, or not necessarily intentionally false, but people think something is ICE activity, or it ends up being CPD or things like that. So the first thing is to verify if it's happening, and then to document, to try to get a phone number of the person being detained, someone we can call on their behalf, and then do a lot of education with people in the area. So anybody else who is around, to give them know your rights information, to canvass the area to make sure people understand that their rights and hopefully no one else is at risk. Or if we get there after the event has already taken place, to canvass and try to see if anybody knew the person who was detained, how we get in contact with them, et cetera. So that's sort of the quick overview of the way rapid response works. Also, a lot of organizing is being done around schools and making sure pickup and drop off are as safe as possible for families. So the rapid response networks are organizing to be present at pickup and drop off at lots of schools. That's another thing they're doing. Yes?
How can we support your organization, the Resurrection Project?
Yeah, so the organization I work for is called the Resurrection Project. We would love donations, so please feel free to go online and donate. Another thing that you can do, like I mentioned, we have sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. We're constantly announcing ways to get involved and what's most useful right now. One of those things, we have a huge amount of Know Your Rights material. We want to make sure every single person in the city knows their rights. So come pick it up, canvass your neighborhood, canvass another neighborhood, put signs in yards, go to businesses. It's helpful to make sure people know their rights, and it's also helpful to make sure people know that people care about them and that this is a city that protects immigrants. And so that's just a really concrete way to support. Any other other questions? All right. Oh, it sounds like we have leftover flyers and yard signs here, so take them home with you. They're at the back. Please grab some on the way out and distribute them widely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you very much for the Resurrection Project and Eddie, thanks to you who already spoke out. We'll be sending a recap email that includes a link to the live stream and a link to the website for everyone who supported us tonight, including the Resurrection Project. And please subscribe to the Congress's newsletter where we'll let folks know about any upcoming events like this and additional information about stuff that's going on in our communities. So thank you all again.
Thanks.